Have you ever stopped and wondered if there is knowledge in this world that was never meant to be discovered? Across ancient civilizations, from forgotten kingdoms to secret traditions, stories have always existed about hidden powers that ordinary people were warned not to explore. Yet, despite fear and silence, curiosity never disappeared. What exactly is black magic, and why has it followed humanity for thousands of years, from the past into our modern world? Is it only superstition, or something deeper that history tried to hide from us? Today we uncover that mysterious journey through time. Throughout history, black magic has appeared in many different cultures, not as a simple story, but as something people truly believed in. Ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even parts of Europe all have records of secret rituals, hidden symbols, and mysterious practices that were kept away from ordinary society. This is where the real curiosity begins. Who were the people using it? Some were priests, some were healers, and others were seen as outcasts who lived on the edge of society. In many cases, they were not considered evil at first. Instead, they were believed to have knowledge that could influence nature, heal the sick, or even control unseen forces. But over time, fear started to grow. Why was it feared so deeply? The answer lies in control and misunderstanding. Anything that could not be explained by science or religion was often labeled dangerous. When something gave people power beyond normal limits, whether real or imagined, it quickly became forbidden. Leaders and religious authorities often banned these practices to protect their influence and maintain order. But the biggest question remains: what actually made it so powerful in people's minds? Was it real supernatural energy, or just belief so strong that it felt real? And why did every generation continue to pass these stories forward instead of letting them disappear? The more we explore, the more confusing it becomes. History does not give one clear answer. Instead, it leaves behind clues, myths, and warnings that still make us wonder today. Was black magic truly forbidden or simply misunderstood? Before we go deeper into these mysterious stories, take a moment and think how much of this hidden history do you already know, and how much is still waiting to be uncovered. If you're enjoying this journey into the secrets of the past, make sure to stay with us until the end, because the most surprising parts are still ahead. Many people stop watching too early and miss the real meaning behind these ancient stories. So don't let that happen here. If you find this topic interesting, you can support the video by liking it. It helps more people discover these forgotten stories. And if you're new here, consider subscribing, because we regularly explore fascinating histories, mysteries, and stories that connect the past with the present. Now, let's continue together and slowly uncover what history tried to hide. To understand the history of black magic, we first need to step back into the ancient world, where science did not yet exist in the way we know it today. In those times, people tried to explain life, death, nature, and disasters through beliefs, symbols, and unseen forces. In ancient Egypt, magic was deeply connected with religion. Priests were not only spiritual leaders, but also believed to be healers who could use sacred words, rituals, and amulets to protect people from evil and illness. To them, magic was part of daily life, not something separate or strange. In Mesopotamia, one of the earliest civilizations, people believed that spirits and invisible forces controlled health and misfortune. They used prayers, charms, and rituals written on clay tablets to protect themselves from disease or bad luck. If someone became sick, it was often believed that a curse or angry spirit was the cause. In early Europe, especially during ancient and later medieval times, similar beliefs existed. People feared witches, spells, and unseen forces that could bring harm. Natural events like storms, crop failure, or sudden death were often linked to magical influence rather than natural causes. Across all these civilizations, one common idea remained the same. Humans were trying to understand what they could not explain. Magic, in many ways, became a bridge between fear and understanding, between the known world and the unknown. In the ancient world, the idea of black magic was never just about mysterious forces or dark rituals. It was always connected to real people living ordinary lives in extraordinary times. These individuals were shaped by the fears, beliefs, and limitations of their societies. In ancient Egypt, for example, priests were among the most respected figures. They were seen as both spiritual guides and practical healers. These priests performed rituals, used sacred words, and created protective charms for illness and danger. To the people of that time, they were not magicians, in a strange sense. They were trusted members of society trying to maintain balance between humans and the unseen world. In Mesopotamia, healers and spiritual advisors played a similar role. They studied signs, interpreted dreams, and used rituals to protect people from misfortune. When someone fell ill, these healers were called to find out whether the cause was physical, spiritual, or a curse believed to be sent by unseen forces. Again, these were ordinary people trying to explain suffering in a world without modern medicine. Later in early Europe, the picture changed. Women and men who practiced herbal medicine, midwifery, or traditional healing were sometimes labeled as witches. Many of them were not powerful sorcerers, but simple villagers who understood plants and natural remedies. However, during times of fear and misunderstanding, their knowledge was sometimes seen as dangerous or forbidden. Across all these cultures, one truth remains clear: these figures were not separate from society. They were part of it: doctors, priests, healers, and villagers, each trying to make sense of life with the knowledge they had. As time moved forward, something important began to change in how societies viewed magic. What was once seen as healing, knowledge, or spiritual practice slowly started turning into fear. The same rituals that were once respected began to be questioned, and people started asking a dangerous question: what if this power is not holy, but harmful? Religious leaders and rulers played a major role in this shift. In many regions, anything that could not be explained through official religion or early forms of science was labeled suspicious. Magic, especially practices done in secret or outside accepted traditions, began to be described as forbidden. This created a clear line between what was considered acceptable belief and what was seen as dangerous knowledge. As fear spread, suspicion grew among ordinary people. Neighbors started looking at each other differently. If someone was successful in healing, unusually knowledgeable about herbs, or simply different in behavior, they could be questioned. In some cases, misunderstandings were enough to create serious accusations. People no longer felt safe practicing old traditions openly, and many began hiding their knowledge. Rulers also saw an opportunity to maintain control. By labeling certain practices as black magic, they could strengthen authority and reduce practices they could not regulate. This led to laws and punishments in some societies, where accused individuals faced isolation, interrogation, or worse. Even without clear proof, fear was often enough to decide someone's fate. What makes this period so powerful in history is not just the belief in magic itself, but the growing division it created. Communities that once shared knowledge began to break apart. Trust slowly turned into doubt, and curiosity turned into fear. The idea of black magic was no longer just a belief, it became a label that could destroy lives. And from this growing tension, a darker chapter of history was slowly beginning to form. The rising fear of black magic did not stay as thoughts or suspicions for long. It eventually turned into action. This is where history takes a darker and more intense turn, as belief transformed into punishment, and rumors became powerful enough to decide life and death. In different parts of Europe and other regions, the idea of witch hunts began to spread. People believed that evil forces were not only real, but were actively working through individuals living among them. Once this belief took hold, communities started searching for those they thought were responsible for misfortune, illness, or natural disasters. Accusations often started very simply. A failed harvest, an unexpected death, or even a personal argument could lead someone to be suspected. Once accused, it was extremely difficult to defend oneself. Fear had already taken control of people's minds, and logic often had little power against it. Witch trials became a formal part of this process in some areas. Accused individuals were brought before local authorities and questioned under extreme pressure. In many cases, evidence was based on rumors, personal conflicts, or unusual behavior rather than facts. This made the situation even more dangerous because anyone could be targeted. What makes this turning point so tragic is that many of the accused were ordinary people healers, midwives, or simply those who did not fit into social expectations. Innocence was not always enough to protect them. Once fear became stronger than understanding, justice began to fade. This period shows how deeply belief can influence reality. Black magic was no longer just an idea discussed in secret. It had become a reason for punishment, division, and irreversible consequences in human history. As fear of black magic grew stronger, it began to shape some of the most intense and controversial events in history. Across Europe, especially between the 15th and 17th centuries, witch trials became more organized and widespread. These were not small incidents anymore. They turned into large social movements fueled by fear, religion, and political control. In places like Germany, France, Scotland, and parts of England, thousands of people were accused of practicing witchcraft. The belief was that these individuals had made agreements with dark forces and were responsible for misfortune in society. Trials were often carried out in public or under strict authority, where accusations alone could carry heavy consequences. One of the most striking aspects of these events was how quickly fear spread from one community to another. When one town experienced accusations, nearby regions often followed. Stories of witches were shared and repeated, growing more dramatic with each telling. This created a cycle where belief reinforced fear, and fear reinforced more accusations. Outside Europe, similar patterns appeared in different forms. In some African, Middle Eastern, and Asian cultures, traditional spiritual practices were sometimes misunderstood or labeled as dangerous magic by outside influences or changing rulers. However, in many of these regions, such practices still remain deeply connected to healing, protection, and cultural identity. At the same time, rituals linked to black magic were not always seen as purely evil within local traditions. In some cultures, they were part of spiritual balance, used to protect against harm, remove negative energy, or seek justice. This shows that the meaning of magic was never the same everywhere. It changed depending on belief systems, power structures, and historical context. As centuries passed, the idea of black magic continued to spread through stories, trade, migration, and written records. Each region added its own interpretation, making it a global concept shaped by many voices. What began as spiritual practice or explanation of the unknown slowly became a symbol of fear in some places and tradition in others. These major events show one important truth: black magic was never a single story. It was a collection of beliefs, fears, and cultural meanings that evolved differently across the world, leaving behind a complex and unforgettable chapter in human history. At the height of fear, the world of black magic beliefs reached its most intense and disturbing point. This was the moment in history when suspicion no longer needed strong proof, and fear itself became the strongest form of evidence. Communities were no longer calm or careful, they were consumed by panic, and that panic shaped every decision. Mass witch trials began to take place in several regions at the same time. Entire communities were affected as accusations multiplied rapidly. Once one person was accused, others often followed. Sometimes even people who had no connection at all. Fear worked like a chain reaction, spreading from village to village, town to town. Interrogations became harsher, and in many cases people confessed to things they never truly did. The pressure, isolation, and terror of the situation broke many individuals emotionally. These confessions were then used as proof, which led to even more arrests and punishments. The cycle continued, growing stronger with every case. Executions and punishments became public events in some places, meant to serve as warnings to others. Instead of calming fear, these events often increased it. People began to live in constant anxiety, afraid that any small mistake, unusual behavior, or personal conflict could lead to serious accusations. Trust between neighbors weakened, and silence became safer than speaking. The human cost of this period was immense. Many innocent lives were lost, not because of real dark powers, but because of fear, misunderstanding, and social pressure. Families were destroyed, communities were divided, and generations carried the memory of what happened during these dark times. At this peak of chaos, black magic was no longer just a belief or tradition. It had become a powerful symbol of fear that controlled society itself. And in this darkness, the world would eventually be forced to question whether the danger was truly magic or the fear that humans created around it. As time passed, the extreme fear surrounding black magic slowly began to fade. The world did not change overnight, But step by step, society started to move away from blind belief and toward observation, reasoning, and understanding. The same questions that once created fear now started to inspire curiosity and learning. One of the most important changes came with the growth of science. People began to study the human body, nature, and natural events more closely. Illnesses were no longer only seen as curses but as medical conditions with real causes. Storms, crop failures, and other disasters also started to be explained through natural processes instead of supernatural forces. Education and knowledge played a key role in this transformation. As literacy increased and information spread, people became less dependent on fear-based explanations. Laws and justice systems also improved, making it harder for accusations to be accepted without real evidence. Slowly, the power of superstition began to weaken. Religious and cultural views also evolved over time in many regions. While traditional beliefs remained important, many societies began separating spiritual faith from fear-driven ideas of black magic. Practices that were once labeled as dangerous were re-examined with a more balanced and thoughtful approach. By the modern era, black magic was no longer treated as a real force controlling everyday life in most parts of the world. Instead, it became part of history, folklore, and cultural stories. What once caused fear and chaos is now studied as a lesson about human psychology, belief, and the power of misunderstanding. In the end, society did not completely erase these ideas, but it learned to see them through the lens of knowledge rather than fear. The history of black magic leaves us with a powerful lesson about human nature. It shows how fear, when not guided by knowledge, can easily turn into misunderstanding, and how misunderstanding can sometimes lead to serious harm. When people do not have clear answers, they often fill the gaps with imagination, and that imagination can grow into belief, sometimes helpful, but sometimes dangerous. One of the biggest lessons from this story is that not everything unknown is something to fear. Throughout history, many innocent people suffered simply because they were different, misunderstood, or connected to traditions that others did not understand. This reminds us how important it is to question before we judge. Knowledge and education play a key role in protecting society from repeating the same mistakes. When people understand science, history, and human behavior, they are less likely to be controlled by fear or rumors. Learning helps replace suspicion with clarity. In the end, this story is not only about black magic. It is about how easily belief can shape reality, and how important it is to balance curiosity with understanding. The story is not only about history and mystery. It is also a simple and powerful way to improve your English. When you listen to stories like this, you are not just learning information. You are also training your brain to understand natural English in context. One of the biggest benefits is vocabulary. You hear common words like belief, fear, society, history, and knowledge used again and again in different situations. This repetition helps you remember them naturally without memorizing lists. Another important point is sentence structure. In storytelling, English is used in a smooth and connected way. You can see how ideas are linked with words like because, however, therefore, and as a result. This improves your understanding of how English sentences are built in real communication. Listening to stories also improves your comprehension skills. Even if you do not understand every single word, you can still follow the meaning through context. This is one of the best ways to become confident in English. So, while you explore stories about the past, you are also improving your language skills step by step. The more you listen, the more natural English will feel until you start understanding it without effort. As we reach the end of this journey through the history of black magic, take a moment to reflect on everything we explored together, from ancient beliefs to fear, from misunderstanding to knowledge, and from history to learning English in a simple way. If you enjoyed this storytelling experience, consider subscribing to the channel. It will help you stay connected with more videos like this, where we explore fascinating historical stories, mysteries of the past, and simple English learning content that is easy to follow and understand. You can also support the video by liking it, because it helps more learners discover these kinds of educational stories. And don't forget to comment below. Tell us what you found most interesting or what topic you would like to explore next. If you liked this video, you might also enjoy stories about ancient civilizations, lost histories, mysterious cultures, or other hidden parts of human history. Each story is designed not only to inform you, but also to improve your English in a natural and engaging way. So stay with us, keep learning, and keep exploring. More powerful and interesting stories are coming soon, and your next favorite video might already be waiting for you here.